So you decided to move from Lynrose. So tell us about the home at Lynrose. How you, how you found it or what?
We went to Gail Andrus again, and she found us this brand new home on a cul-de-sac on Lynrose in Temple City, just a block south of Live Oak Avenue. So it was still in Temple City, but it was still in the ward, and it was back in the Arcadia School District, so it met all of our qualifications. It was brand new, and it had 4 bedrooms, because I thought I can't have a baby with no bedroom for her. And the funny thing is, we never ever used all 4 rooms as bedrooms. The 4th one we made a study out of. But that's how we moved back. But the houses were so close together. On the east end, there was a kind of a field, because we were the first house on that side in the cul-de-sac, and then it went clear up to the corner on the north side. But on the west side, if you went out our door and took 4 giant steps, you were at the door of our next door neighbors. And it was all girls, and it was Karen's friends. Nobody, and tiny, tiny little backyard. The tiniest little backyard I've ever seen. And it saved us there because it backed up onto a man from the next street that had a deep lot, and so it was just the back end of his yard. So we weren't surrounded by people, only on that one side. But we could hear they were a Catholic family, and they argued loud, young. Can't think of their name, just can see the picture of their little girls. The one that was Karen's age was a little redhead, and then she had a younger sister. But we could hear all of their arguments, and I just felt boxed in. I never liked that home. I bought it because it had 4 bedrooms and we could afford it, and it was new, sounded very appealing. We enjoyed it, but we lived there probably a couple of years, and were never very happy because we felt too closed in. No backyard, neighbors too close for comfort, and so we started looking again. So I can't remember too much about Lynrose, except you kids went to First Avenue.
Junior high.
Junior high.
And Longley Way.
Longley Way. But
Elementary.
Elementary. Was it Longley Way there? Okay. But Reed went to 5th and 6th grade at Longley Way then, and Karen went to 3rd and 4th. We loved Reed's teacher. I don't remember his name.
Mr. Sonovic. Mr.
Sonovic. He was a wonderful teacher. Wasn't LDS, but he loved families. And he loved the fact that families had an opportunity to do things as a family. So if he gave homework and you had a family outing, all you had to do was tell him, I did this or that or the other with my family, and he excused the homework. Do you remember that? Well, I do, because I thought it was unique. And it was in Longley, no, it was on Lynrose that I had the experience with Karen. That's right. That she and the little girl that she was friends with, they would walk just up a half a block to the corner, a little teeny short block to Live Oak, and then just up on ahead. The school wasn't too far away, so they walked all the time to school. And they walked this one morning, and they were waiting on Live Oak, or they came to Live Oak, and the house that was on that corner was older and had bushes grown up. There wasn't, people from in the house probably couldn't have seen out very well to the street. And there was a car waiting with the door open and some black men inside. And when those 2 little girls approached, they started waving and smiling. I don't know if they had anything to like candy, I don't remember that, but they were encouraging them to come closer. And it frightened them, happily, and they ran back around the corner and hid in the bushes. And the car left and then circled back, but the girls stayed there. I said, why didn't you come home? and tell us, but they didn't. They had it in their minds they had to get to school, so they hid in the bushes until that car was gone, and then they ran to school, and then they couldn't get into the principal's office fast enough to tell him what had happened. And because of where we lived, we didn't have, it was Arcadia Schools, but it was the county sheriff's office. And they said we had no case because the man had not touched the girls. You know, they couldn't arrest them. They couldn't do anything, but I was terrified. Those girls were driven to school all the rest of the year. And they had they instituted, because of that incident with Karen and her little friend, I can't remember what they call it, but the block neighborhood watch, I think something, that there were people on all the routes that the kids would be walking to school. They had signs in the window of the houses that if you had any problem you could run to that house, and it was some parent that would look after you. But I was so terrified, and one day when we were driving around, Karen recognized the car, and she told me, and we followed it, and found out these men worked at a car wash that was just about a block east from where they came out to go to school. And so these men had undoubtedly seen those little girls going to school, and then lay in wait for their opportunity to kidnap them. And heaven, once again, Heavenly Father looked after our little daughter and blessed her that they did not succeed in kidnapping our little girls. But they were famous for a while because their story went round, and all the parents hugged their kids a little tighter, and the PTA initiated this neighborhood watch. I think maybe that's what it was called. And it very possibly is still going on in the schools today. It's a wonderful program where everybody watches out for everybody else's children as they're coming and going to school. And that was our potentially disastrous experience there that ended up fine because Heavenly Father looked out after us and watched out for our children.
Okay, now, in Lynrose is where Julie was born.
Uh-huh.
Anything that you remember about her labor, delivery, any of that?
Well, all of my deliveries were so fast, I can't remember. I know I just had just kind of a little crampy feeling, nothing that I could identify as labor pains. But we belonged to, the health group we belonged to had us going to, not Kaiser, but it was similar to a Kaiser group health plan that we got through Cal State. And it was Queen of Angels Hospital in Los Angeles was the hospital I had to go to. That's where my doctors were, and I had a different doctor every time I went, so I didn't have anybody. But I just said to Dad this one day, you know, I'm starting to feel just a little, just tiny little cramping. And he knew me from the 2 previous births. And so we went to the hospital. We took you with us. And Dad pulled up at the hospital. I was beside myself. I think it was you. It was one of my babies. But I think it was you. Dad said, Reed, get out of the car and help your mother into the hospital while I go find a place. He walked up to this big hospital, downtown Los Angeles, so I'm sure they saw all sorts of atypical, from our vantage point, situations, and he walked up to see if he could get me admitted to the hospital, and the reception looked at him and said, "And are you the father?" He was kind of big for his age, 12 years old, but I was so upset with her for insulting my son that way. But the doctor checked me out and thought I wasn't quite ready, so I don't remember if you stayed with us the whole time, but I remember we went to lunch before I was actually, you know, I went to the hospital with you and they checked me out, so I don't remember whether we took you someplace or what. But Dad took me to lunch, which is the last thing you should do, because I was hungry. When you're pregnant, you're hungry. And by the time I actually got admitted later in the afternoon, I was in, then you had a labor room and you had a delivery room somewhere else. And I was in the labor room, and the nurse came in, and she didn't think things were coming along quite as fast as they ought to be, and she said, I think I'll break your water. She probably did it with the doctor's permission. So she broke my water, and I said, if you break my water, you better stay really close. And she didn't believe me. And Julie was born on the gurney as it was going from the labor room down to the delivery room. By the time we got to the delivery room, she was there, and I knew it was a girl. Because I had my babies very, very quickly. I don't know if I've told you back, because a long time ago, that when Reed, our first one, was born in Rigby, I started feeling just those little crampy feelings at Aunt Dora's in the afternoon, because she was giving me a baby shower. I went back to Rigby. We were at Idaho State, but to have my baby so Mother could take care of me, and because it was the Dr. Rigby that I knew and loved. And so after my friend and her mother left, they couldn't come that night. They'd come to visit. And I told Aunt Dora, I think things are starting to happen. And so we called Dr. Rigby, and he said, oh, well, just start timing. Have you timed them? We said, no, they're not really labor pains. They're just, you know, little beginning signs. And he said, you time them, and when they get 3 minutes apart, you call me back. I timed them, and they were about 2.5 minutes. They started in then. So we headed about 3 or 4 blocks from Aunt Dora's to this little maternity hospital right across from the doctor's offices in Rigby. It was a house that had been converted with several bedrooms. I wanted to stop and take a bath at Mother's, because I hadn't bathed that day. I was waiting to get cleaned up for the shower. But I stopped to get my little suitcase. And luckily Aunt Dora was with me, and she's a nervous Nellie, and she said, no way am I letting you get into a bathtub. If she had, I'd have had Reed in the bathtub, if she had let me do what I wanted to do, because I felt like I wasn't as clean as I needed to be to go have a baby. And we got just that. We called Mother. We got to this little hospital, and there was a little pay phone, or a little phone of some sort inside the door. My pains were so intense after driving those 3 or 4 blocks with a stop just to get my suitcase, that I had to stop and hunch over until the pain passed before I could walk up the 3 or 4 steps and in. So I called Reed at Pocatello. He had borrowed his folks' car because it was newer, and he thought faster than ours, so he had traded cars with them. And he got there after the baby was born. I was being stitched up. That's how fast Reed was born. Mother was there with me in the delivery room. And I remember, because all they gave you was little ether in between pains. They'd sprinkle a little ether on a little gauze mask that went over your face. And I remember saying on the delivery table, I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind. I don't want to have this baby. Because he came so fast. But that's the only time I ever said I didn't want him, because I adored him. 9 pounds 4 ounces for a first baby was pretty big, but all of them came fast. So Julie came fast, was born in the gurney going down, but came home to a family that really loved her.
So, what other memories do you have of the Lynrose home when Julie was young?
When Julie was a toddler, Arlene and Terry were doing something for the day. I don't remember where they were going, but they asked me if I would take Tracy and keep her. And Julie and Tracy were both toddlers. They've played together all their lives. And Reed Jr., Reed Wayne, was getting sick, he thought, and he wanted some aspirin. So I trusted him. He's 12 years old or close to it. And so I said, you know where the aspirin are? You can go get some. And he did, and he forgot to put the aspirin bottle away, and the little girls got into it. And I hadn't given him the aspirin, so I didn't know, was it a full bottle, was it a half a bottle? But they came out with aspirins in their hands, and they were both eating them. And so I called Dr. Brown, who was our doctor, and he said, oh, they wouldn't want to pump their stomachs unless we have more of an indication of that. So he gave us some Ipecac syrup, and I gave those two little girls Ipecac syrup, and I don't know if you know, but you take it and then it makes you vomit. So he figured whatever's in their stomach will come out with the Ipecac, and I don't want him to go through he was a very practical LDS good doctor. We loved him. And I thought, what do I do with two toddlers that have taken Ipecac? So I ran the bathtub with water and put them in for a bath, and they both vomited in the bathtub, and I didn't have a mess in the house. That's the practical side of me. But when Terry and Arlene came to pick Tracy up, I was so guilt-ridden. I had a hard time telling them that I had been a negligent mother, and their little girl had had aspirins while they left her in my care. But they survived, never had. I doubt that they had very many, but Dr. Brown made sure that we didn't take any chances. And in Lynrose, as I've said, that's where Reed did his Little League basketball and Cub Scouting. That's another thing I remember, the Cub Scouting, and that's back to La Rosa, but I have to mention it because Reed Wayne started Cub Scouts when we lived on La Rosa, and he and Tim were in the same pack. And they wanted me to be involved. At that time, the church did not have Cub Scouts as part of the church program, so it was a community program. And they wanted me to be involved, and I didn't have much relationship with any of those parents in that El Monte School District. So I became the refreshment chairman for the PAC meetings. And we'd have the PAC meetings at the school, and I had a big silver urn about this tall and about that big around, and part of my responsibilities of refreshment chairman was to make the container full of coffee for the parents. And so I did it. I never knew how that coffee tasted. Somebody told me about how you did it, and I'd fill the hot water, dump in the coffee, have the glasses there, and clean it out afterwards. And so I made coffee every PAC meeting while Reed was in Cub Scouts at La Rosa. And then I always saw that there were cookies and treats for the kids, and I never could teach those kids from El Monte to be courteous and take a plate to their mother first. It was a race to see who got the first and could garner the most of those boys. They were the most unruly boys I had ever seen, and I tried the whole time I was refreshment chairman to teach them to learn a little courtesy and to take a cookie to their mother, but it was a lost cause, and none of the mothers there seemed to care, and so I didn't worry about it. And then we moved to Lynrose, and I got to pass on that coffee pot to somebody else. So that was the sum of my experience with Cub Scouts. Then we moved into always we were with West Arcadia, and I think, were you involved with the church at all? Did they start it while you were still a Cub Scout, or was it later? I think Reed went through just the regular community Cub Scout, but David had good Cub Scout leaders, and I never did have that call to serving Cub Scouts, but it was fun even then to be with my boy.
Tell us about, there's the family legend about Julie and her eating habits in the high chair.
Oh, well, we adored her, so she could do no wrong. But she would sit in the high chair in our nice house in Lynrose that had the cooking area, the storage area around in one end, and then a combination, and stools around the bar. We always ate at the stools because we wanted to use the other part as a family room and not as a eating area. And she would eat at the high chair, and when she'd had all she wanted to eat, she would take her dish and put it upside down on her head. And a lot of it went to the floor, but I lived through that every meal she ate when she was sitting as a little youngster in the high chair. And we were still I kind of got teaching in my blood a little bit, and so when Julie got a little older, I found Barry Smith's wife, who was Terry's younger brother. Can't think of her name, but she was at home, younger, but with a little child. She agreed to tend Julie, and you other two were in school, and all I was going to do was substitute, you know, just to bring in a little extra money once in a while and to kind of hone my teaching skills. I was still working on getting my degree. I take it back. I graduated when I was about quite pregnant. I hope I'm not forgetting. I'm not getting children mixed up, but I remember Arlene and I going to school there. I think I graduated with my degree when I was so pregnant with one of the kids, so if it wasn't Julie, it was one of the others, that when my sociology teacher, I handed in my final exam to him, he said, I didn't even think I knew who I was in the class, because it wasn't a class where you associated much with each other, or mostly lecture. But when I handed in that final exam, he said, I thought you would never make it. So, and it was while I was pregnant with Julie that we took, no, Julie was a baby and I was pregnant with David, I think, when we took our trip up to Aunt Ted's. So I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit. But anyhow, I let Marilyn Smith was her name, took care of Julie. It was supposed to be just on the days that I got a call to go substitute teach, and I was registered now with the Arcadia School District because I had taught my 5th grade the one year, and I thought it was simpler just to, it could be through junior high school, but I liked the elementary school because I felt a little more experienced there. But I substituted just a few times in the Arcadia School District. It wasn't immediate because I remember substituting in junior high school and the kids didn't pay much attention to me. They just wrote and threw their papers in the wastebasket, and I thought it was a whole week that teacher was out and they were supposed to be preparing for some project, and I would prepare things, but they wouldn't listen to me very much because I was a substitute. And junior high is a hard age, I decided, for kids. So I remember that, but I remember that I would substitute and they learned that I was good with kids, and so I would get the classes that nobody else wanted. They would put me in the classes with unrulier kids, and I always got along real well. But I ended up substituting at a kindergarten class in Highland Oaks. I don't know, is that what it was called?
I believe so.
Highland Oaks, up or in the Arcadia First Ward area, and just a time or two, and I don't remember, I think the teacher quit because she was pregnant. At that time they didn't want pregnant women teaching in the school. So I took over the kindergarten. They asked me if I would do it full time. And it was the last half of the year, so I thought, okay, I can do this with Julie. You know, she'll survive because I've got a good person that I trusted her with, and it was giving us a little extra money. And so I'd have a morning class, and then about an hour and a half break, and then an afternoon class. So I never had any preparation to take home. I taught kindergarten, and when I was home with the kids, full attention. So I thought, this is going to work pretty well. And while I was teaching, that we decided to sell at Lynrose and buy a house up in Arcadia with a bigger yard. Because I remember coming home, and sometimes if I hadn't cleaned up after Julie, there was still scrambled eggs on the floor if I'd had to hurry and go off to school, because her penchant for covering her head in what was leftover food. But by the time I finished that partial year of kindergarten, I was pregnant with David. So we were trying really hard to have an extra one to go with Julie. And we were blessed. Our prayers were answered. But by the time I finished that year, I wasn't showing, so I made it through. But some of the teachers guessed by watching me eat my lunch, you know, that I was...
Now, I believe it was while you were doing that kindergarten that you had the incident with the snake.
Yes, I did. That was a funny incident.
And then we'll take a break and come back later.
Okay, time for church. Since I had a morning class and an afternoon class, and when I taught kindergarten then, it was still at a time when they had little flat pads that would fold over, and you would open it up and the kids would have a rest period, where in the middle of your kindergarten class you would stop and all of them lie down on mats and have a little rest period. Nobody ever went to sleep. But they had that little break. And this one day, a little boy brought a snake. And I can't remember what kind. I want to say a king snake, but I don't know snakes. But he brought a snake in a shoebox, of all things. And he brought it to kindergarten to share. His dad had given him permission. So he took that snake, I think it was an afternoon student, and he took that snake out and showed it to the class, and we put it back in the box, and
I think it was the morning student had the snake, and it was the afternoon that you found it.
But anyhow, a student brought a snake and shared it, and it got away. By the time he went home, the snake was nowhere to be found. And that was in the morning, and I didn't know what to do about it, so I just went ahead with school. And I've got my little afternoon class down on the mats, taking their nap, and one of them says, "Mrs. Gunnell, I see a snake under there." We had a big cabinet that was the storage, and it was a space about that big underneath. And she said, "Mrs. Gunnell, I see a snake under." And I wasn't worried, because I knew it was this snake that we'd seen, but I didn't know what to do with him. So I called, and it was an older woman that was a principal. And I said, "I had a student in the morning that brought a snake, and we lost it, but now we've found it. Can you send somebody to come help retrieve it? You know, it's not one that will injure the kids." And the kids, because I was so calm, they were calm too. And so the janitor came with a cage, and he rescued this snake and put it in a secure place. And I really got it from that principal that I wasn't very smart, that I let this little boy, well, I couldn't have done much with it. He brought it to school, but that I hadn't made sure that I secured that snake. I didn't have much experience with snakes, and I didn't know that a snake would wiggle its way out of a closed shoebox and slither off somewhere. So, but I loved that kindergarten. I loved working with kids. I wasn't correcting anybody else's mistakes, and I got hugged so hard that I was afraid sometime they were going to put my neck out of joint, and I taught them primary songs. They didn't know the difference, you know, like popcorn popping on the apricot tree and things that didn't say I'm trying to be like Jesus. I had, you know, knew that I shouldn't be teaching that or I'd have a parent complaining, but I taught them all the fun songs that I knew. And we had a big pet turtle, a big one, that came with the class when I got there, that lived in one of those milk crate cartons with newspapers, and he would hibernate all winter, and then he would come out, and I'd bring him lettuce and whatever I could scavenge from lunch, and the kids would, he would go out, and they had their kindergarten, that school had their own little private play area, and we could take this turtle out and let the kids play with it, and he was fun. I never had any adventures with him. He was fun, and I enjoyed them. But, and that was, David came, and I never ever tried to teach school after that.
Is there anything else about the Lynrose property, life, when you were in Lynrose, that was there?
I can't think. Life was pretty good. I had kids that were wonderful, doing well in school, and I remember you read, excuse me, that I was happily surprised when you came home from junior high school. Did you start junior high school when we were still on Lynrose? And you liked playing in the orchestra better than in the band, because you carried on the tradition I started of playing a trombone, and you had taken over the old trombone.
I played your trombone, yep.
And it was my heart's desire to have you could be the athlete your dad wanted you to be, but I wanted you to be a bit of a musician for your mom. And when you came home and said you liked orchestra better than band, and I said, why? And he said, you said because of the classical music they play. I thought that was interesting. You probably don't even remember that. But you started out at First Avenue Junior High, and Karen was still at Longley Way Elementary School. And